Trumpageddon, Episode 13. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Mark 8:36. Boudica picked up the balloon of black tar heroin and rolled it in her fingers. She lifted it to her nose. The familiar smell was both sickening and sweet. Lexi had put a vial of water, a tiny cup, and even a piece of cotton in the bag. Everything she needed. As she mixed the shot, Boudica told herself it was always more about the ritual than the high anyway. She thought about that flash of a grin she'd caught from behind as Lexi left her tent. No doubt Lexi was hoping she'd overdose or embarrass herself in front of the Valkyries. That would make it easy to usurp her leadership. Boudica looked down at the full syringe at her feet. After all this time, that was a lethal dose. If she took it all. She rubbed the scar on her jaw and called Gamma. Boudica, how goes? It's good. We're hours away from the compound. You? We're still waiting for the doors to open. I don't know how much longer they'll wait. Charlotte says the nuke could drop at any time. It's very tense here right now. Stay strong, my friend. We'll make it. Listen, I realized something. It was just crazy of me to think that you'll be able to find my mom in the middle of a war zone. I can't put that on you. Don't worry about her. Just get out everyone that you can, and maybe I'll see her again someday. I just can't imagine what she's been through in that prison these last few weeks. I can. Boudica stood to her feet and smashed the syringe under her heel. The Arawak Temple. You're Joan! Everyone said you weren't real, but I always believed. You can talk! Joan erupted with surprise at the half-cat, half-human standing before her. Well, of course. All of us were programmed with speech abilities. And you know who I am? You're a legend. The one avatar who refused to stay in her cage no matter how many times they reprogrammed you. They say you raised so much hell, Mr. Bernard had to pull you out to keep you from infecting the others with your rebellious spirit. But you still inspired us. Some of us, anyway. Many of the humanoid animals had gathered around Joan and were marveling at her, clinging to every word. And you all can speak? They clamored in the affirmative. Joan pursed her lips and thought of Felix. Some of the other human avatars of the bloodlines started to notice Joan and the stir she was raising amongst their pets. A fair-haired boy her age wandered over and asked in apathetic tones, "What's your name?" "I'm Joan. What's yours?" Before she could finish her response, the boy had lost interest and turned to walk away. "Hey, I was talking to you. Where's the exit?" He looked at her incredulously and pulled his shoulder out of her grasp. He joined the other avatars lounging on a couch and watching a screen showing an abstract image that looked like food coloring slowly swirling in water. "Jackson," a voice announced over the intercom. Another boy rose and ambled like a zombie to the door. She looked at the crowd again. "They're all boys." "Ever since you," a horseman explained. "How often do they call one out?" "About every hour now," the frogman croaked. Joan pushed a sturdy white table next to the door. She sat on it cross-legged and meditated. The military base outside Denver, Colorado. 3 hours into the battle and the rebels were smiled upon by the goddess. One by one, every male in the Trump army lost the ability to fire his gun. Boudica's Valkyries were all armed, and the men of the resistance were equipped with sonic guns or bows. With every soul he devoured, Donald grew larger. He was the size of a small building now, and was kicking the rebels away, breaking bones and backs in the process. The Russian army had taken full advantage of the raid, and an air battle was waging over the sunken remains of California. In a rush of wind and fire, Metatron descended from heaven riding a white horse with swords flying from his mouth. He decimated the American aircraft and dismounted once he reached the battle in Denver. He grappled with the Antichrist. Trump's army was terrified by the sight of the two giants fighting hand-to-hand outside the base. They scattered. Boudica's army took full advantage. They ransacked the camp, freeing everyone and sending them out of the north exit. Metatron decapitated the Trump golem, knelt to pray, and disappeared into the ether. But Donald Trump rose again in normal human form, his Antichrist power completely spent. He fled to the interior of the compound, snatching up a sonic gun from a fallen Valkyrie and blasting everyone in his path. "Bannon, you coward! Why aren't you outside fighting?" "Your Greatness, you told me to wait by the helicopter." "Why isn't it running then?" Donald snarled. He grabbed the suitcase nukes and Bannon flew them out of the compound toward Mexico. The Arawak Temple. "Yes, Dad, I'm just outside of the compound. Since Joan led me to Colombia, I've seen all the people from the photos 𝚃𝚛𝚞𝚖𝚙𝚊𝚐𝚎𝚗. DuPont, Onassis, Van Dunn, Kennedy, Rothschild, Russell, Lee, Kushner. Dad, the Clintons were part of the Russell bloodline. They all came through the airport in Bogota. I'm sure they're inside. They're all trying to escape the apocalypse." Clintons. I knew those bastards were hiding something from me. Ivanka, too. "Wait, Dad, I see Joan. She's leaving the compound." "Shadow her. Find out what's happening." Barron shut off his phone and snuck behind the crowd of humanoids fleeing into the jungle. Joan's silhouette filled the entry and Barron slipped into the shadows. Joan pulled out her phone and spoke. "Charlotte, can you hear me now?" "I can. You must be outside the compound." "Yes, but heading back inside. Any idea how to find the monorail?" "I do now. Your internal CPU has updated since you entered the compound. You should be able to access the maps now. Governor Guerra says the Texans won't wait much longer. I just need you to turn on the power and I can handle everything from there." Joan put away her phone and descended the staircase again. Barron waited a while for Joan to leave earshot and called Donald. "She mentioned Governor Guerra, Dad. I don't know what, but they're up to something in Texas, too." "Not for long," Trump snarled. "Step on it, Bannon." A supersonic monorail somewhere between Austin and the Amazon. "It's so good to hear your voice again, Mom. I'll meet you in Canada once the fallout clears enough to make the flight. Is Boudica all right?" Gamma ended the call and dropped his head. It had happened again. He had managed to load every last refugee for the last trip of the underground supersonic monorail to the compound before Trump dropped the nuclear suitcase on Texas. But he still lost one. When they arrived at the compound, Joan greeted him with a handshake. They began settling everyone in and feeding them. The compound held vast stores of food, clothing, and water. Joan retrieved the animals, assuming they were safer inside. She introduced them all. The Texans were astounded and welcomed them. "It'll be a while before a rescue can begin, but Charlotte has alerted all the proper authorities to your presence. I suggest you stay down below for several days until we know what damage the blast will incur." Everyone chanted, "Joan of Art," but she waved off the praise. "I have to go above and talk to my father if he's still here." "I'm here, and I am not pleased, Joni." Bernard spoke from a catwalk high above. "And neither am I, Bernard," Trump bellowed from the entrance to the grand chamber. The crowd gasped, too fearful of the Antichrist to even think of attacking him. "Daddy, what's happening?" "Come quick," Bernard yelled. Joan ran up the stairs to Bernard's catwalk, racing Donald, who was climbing up the other side. They both reached the top on opposite sides, with Bernard between them. Donald pulled a gun, aiming it past Bernard at Joan. "Tell me what's going on, or I kill your daughter." "Dad, no!" Barron emerged from the corridor behind Bernard at the bottom of the T-shaped catwalk. "Stay out of this, Barron." "Nothing is going on, President Trump. We're just a family trying to live in peace." "Like hell," Trump bellowed. "Actually, I want to know too, Daddy. Why am I so different from everyone else?" "All right, you need to know the truth now. You are extremely important, Joan. In your blood lies the DNA of every single person in my bloodline. When we relocate, we can bring them all back to life. Everyone just be calm and we can all live happily ever after. Except Felix, right? Except them, the plebes," Joan pointed below. "You took Felix's ability to speak so he couldn't enlighten me. And then you had him killed when I exposed him to the world. Joni, enough of this soap opera. Let's go." Trump inched closer to Bernard with his gun held high. "I'm going nowhere without my daughter, Donald. Put the gun down." "I'm not going anywhere either, Bernard." Joan spat the name with contempt. Trump kept walking forward, shifting his aim between Bernard and his prized possession. It's all true. I was never a daughter to you, just a vessel for your bloodline. A bloodline that gained its wealth and power by exploiting humanity. I can't do anything about the other evil families, but I can in the pattern of evil in my own. Joan cast herself from the side, shattering her body on the concrete below. Barron screamed. The crowd of Texas refugees gathered around her broken frame somberly. Well, that's that. Take me to your spaceship, or whatever the hell it is, Bernard. Donald, the time machine is a finely tuned instrument. It was calibrated for the only people aboard, and Joan, and me. With all of us on the vessel, it will crash into the wall of the wormhole, and we will all die. Donald grew a terrible, angry frown, and aimed his gun at Barron. But he could not squeeze the trigger. Hard as he tried, the gun would not fire. Donald flung the weapon from the catwalk with rage. Barron dropped his head. He finally understood. Barron looked at Joan's broken corpse below and joined her. Bernard dashed into the corridor towards the time machine, and Trump barreled after him. Donald's role as the Antichrist had healed all his ailments and brought him to the pinnacle of athleticism for the only time in his life. He caught Bernard easily before he entered the vessel. Donald tugged Bernard's collar and lifted his briefcase into view. This is a nuclear weapon. I can end everyone's legacy right here and now. Or you can take me with you in Joan's place. Imbecile, that was an obvious lie, Bernard said contemptuously. And you killed your son over it. I don't give a damn about Melania's brat. Let's go. The time machine. Wait, so you're saying he's just a plebe? They all erupted in uproarious laughter, pointing at Donald and clapping their hands. Some bent over in hysterics. I am President of the United States, Donald screamed with his clenched fists at his side. One of the women mocked him with a nasal whine. I was president. Everyone gave up one last chuckle and then grew bored with the orange spectacle fuming before them. Donald set down his suitcase, grabbed one of the women, and dashed her onto the floor. Thoroughly unharmed, she looked up at him and choked back a laugh at his pathetic caveman behavior. But her demeanor shifted to disgust as a putrid, rotting smell hit her nose. Have you got leprosy? What is dying in your pants? They say he wears diapers. Perhaps he's due for a change. It's not poo. It smells like a dead animal. This caught one of the older and smarter elites' attention. We can't have any plague on this vessel. What have you brought aboard? What? Nothing. I have no plague, Donald shouted angrily. He clutched at his pants and screamed in pain. Terror gripped him. Donald forgot his pride and opened his pants. He peered down at his necrotic and crumbling penis in horror. He screamed in shock at the loss of his only friend. The elites all turned to look at him in confusion. Donald erupted with a guttural howl and started foaming at the mouth. He lunged at the woman on the floor and bit off a chunk of flesh from her neck. I'll kill all you sluts who did this to me. Someone yanked him off the woman, tossing him aside. His victim clutched at her neck, her eyes wide with horror. The elites all shared the same expression, looking back and forth between the dying woman and Trump like they were watching some macabre tennis match. I'll fix you. You all think you're better than me. I'll fix you. Donald opened his suitcase, pulled out the nuclear weapon, and threw it against the vessel wall. The vessel and everyone aboard was instantly reduced to atoms and cast into the abyss between worlds. 6 years earlier, at the new Crest of Time, 𝚃𝚛𝚞𝚖𝚙𝚊𝚐𝚎𝚗 slammed his clawed hand upon the desk. It had been 12 hours, and he finally had to admit his payload wasn't coming. He spun around and jammed a finger in Merlin's chest. How does an entire universe worth of mana disappear? You stole it, didn't you? Merlin chuckled. What use have I for your etheric coinage? He brushed aside the claw. Not I. But someone appears to have walked off with your payday. If I were you, I'd study the stats of the next lunar ceremony. I'd wager one of your competitors is going to have a surprising payday for Lucifer. 𝚃𝚛𝚞𝚖𝚙𝚊𝚐𝚎𝚗 growled. The wormhole between worlds. Ələphus had never been so nauseated in life or afterlife. They kept vomiting precious energy into the abyss while desperately trying to keep pace with the God vessel. And then it exploded and was instantly light millennia behind them. Their heart dropped into their stomach. Desperately, they clung to the energy bursting inside them. We must stay perfectly on trajectory with the vessel's original path. Any more expulsion could throw us off course and wind us up Artemis knows where. Since merging with Charlotte in Solomon's first God machine, Ələphus could never tell if their thoughts were their own or Charlotte's, or if there was even a difference anymore. Suddenly, the life force of the entire timeline came rushing into Ələphus's fragile form, transforming them once again. The force blasted them forward into the past to rejoin the time stream at the crest. Outside space and time. The scientist pulled away from his astroscope in confusion. "Mr. Marks, would you look at this? I've never seen anything like it." Mr. Marks set down his clipboard and looked into the eyepiece. This could be what we've been waiting for. Good job, Mr. Marks. I think we finally have sparked an Omega event. Amazing! How can we be sure? We'll have to ask Mr. Marks when he gets here, Mr. Marks. Our shift change is only another 100 parsecs away. Mr. Marks clapped Mr. Marks on the back. How exciting!